My daughter kicked me out of the house on Christmas. With nowhere to go, I took a job at a billionaire's mansion. My duty was to clean and take care of his deaf daughter. No one had ever spoken to her before, but when he saw me talking to her in sign language, he said 5 words that made me freeze. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The snow was falling softly outside when my world collapsed on Christmas morning. I had been up since 5:30, preparing the turkey and arranging the table with my grandmother's china, the same set I'd used for every family gathering for the past 40 years. At 66, I still believed in the magic of Christmas, still held on to the hope that maybe this year would be different. Zuri arrived at 10 with her husband Marcus and my 8-year-old grandson Jamie. The moment she walked through the door, I could sense the tension radiating from her like heat from a furnace. Her jaw was set in that familiar way that told me she was spoiling for a fight. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, not even bothering with a greeting. She handed Jamie his tablet and pointed him toward the living room. "Go watch something." I was still wearing my apron, flour dusting my hands from the biscuits I'd been making. "Can it wait until after dinner? Everything's almost ready, and I thought we could—" "No, it can't wait." Zuri's voice cut through my words like a blade. Marcus shifted uncomfortably behind her, avoiding my eyes. "I've been thinking about this for months, and I'm done pretending everything is fine." My heart started racing. That familiar flutter I'd learned to recognize over the years whenever Zuri was about to unleash one of her storms. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sweetheart? Really? You think you can just keep playing the innocent grandmother while you sabotage my family?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "Sabotage? Zuri, what on earth?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about." She stepped closer, her voice rising. "The way you keep trying to get close to Jamie, making me look like the bad mother because I won't let you fill his head with all your nonsense about sign language and special needs acceptance." The words hit me like physical blows. For months, I'd been watching my grandson struggle with communication, seeing the signs that reminded me so much of the children I'd worked with at the community center. Jamie was different, beautiful and brilliant in his own way, but Zuri refused to see it. "He needs help, Zuri. I've been trying to tell you." "He doesn't need help from you." Her face was flushed now, years of resentment pouring out. "You think because you took some classes and learned sign language that you're some kind of expert? You're just a lonely old woman who can't accept that your job as a mother is over." Marcus finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Zuri, maybe we should calm down." "It's Christmas. Don't you dare tell me to calm down." She whirled on him, then turned back to me. "And you know what the worst part is? You've been doing this my whole life, always making me feel like I wasn't enough, like I needed fixing." I reached for her arm, desperate to make her understand. "That's not true. I love you, Zuri. I've always loved you. Everything I've ever done was to help." "Help?" She jerked away from my touch. "You call it help when you undermined every decision I made? When you made me feel guilty for not wanting to learn sign language for kids I don't even know? When you made me feel like a failure because I can't handle Jamie the way you think I should?" The room fell silent, except for the sound of the Christmas music playing softly from the kitchen radio. Jamie looked up from his tablet, his beautiful brown eyes wide with confusion. He couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the anger crackling in the air. "I never meant to make you feel that way," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I just wanted to help you understand him better. He's struggling to communicate, and there are ways—" "There you go again!" Zuri's voice reached a pitch that made me flinch. "Acting like you know better than his own mother. Like you know better than his doctors, his teachers, everyone." "But the signs—" "Stop. Just stop." She held up her hand, and I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Cold finality. "I'm done with this, Mom. I'm done with you constantly questioning my parenting. Done with you making me feel inadequate. Done with you trying to live your life through my son." The words that came next hit me like a punch to the stomach. "Get out!" I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "What?" "Get out of this house. Pack your things and leave. I don't want you around my family anymore." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Zuri, you can't be serious. This is my home too. We've been living together for 3 years since Dad died, I know, and I've regretted every day of it. Her voice was steady now, calculated. This house is in my name. You have no legal right to be here anymore. Marcus stepped forward, looking sick. Zuri, please. Think about what you're saying. I've thought about it plenty. She didn't take her eyes off me. I want you gone by tonight. Take what you can carry and find somewhere else to live. I looked at Jamie, my sweet grandson who was watching this unfold with those intelligent eyes that missed nothing. In that moment, I realized he understood more than any of us gave him credit for. He stood up from the couch and walked over to me, taking my hand in his small one. He couldn't speak the way other children did, but he squeezed my fingers 3 times. It was our secret code. I love you. I squeezed back 3 times, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. You have 2 hours, Zuri said, her voice hollow now, as if the fight had drained out of her. I'm taking Marcus and Jamie to his mother's house. When we come back, I expect you to be gone. They left me standing in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the Christmas feast I'd prepared with such hope. The turkey sat golden and perfect in the oven, the table set for a family celebration that would never happen. I had nowhere to go. My sister lived across the country, my few friends were spending the holidays with their own families, and I had exactly $347 in my checking account. That's when I saw the newspaper on the counter, folded to the classified section. Marcus must have been looking at it earlier. My eyes landed on an ad that seemed to jump off the page. Immediate position available. Live-in caregiver for special needs child. Private residence. Serious inquiries only. There was a phone number. My hands shook as I dialed it, not even sure what I would say. A man's voice answered on the second ring. Deep, tired, with an edge of desperation I recognized all too well. Hello? I'm calling about the caregiver position, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Is it still available? There was a pause. Do you have experience with special needs children? Yes, I said, thinking of all the years I'd volunteered at the community center, all the children I'd helped learn to communicate. I do. Can you start tonight? I looked around the kitchen one last time, at the Christmas tree twinkling in the living room, at the family photos on the mantel that told the story of a life I was about to leave behind. Yes, I said. I can start tonight. 2 hours later, I was standing at the front door of a mansion in the hills, my single suitcase in my hand and my heart hammering in my chest. The man who opened the door was younger than I'd expected, maybe in his early 40s, with dark hair and the kind of exhausted eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and worry. Geneva? He asked. Yes, I'm Darren. He stepped aside to let me in. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I wasn't sure anyone would be available on Christmas. As I stepped into the warmth of his home, I had no idea that my real life was about to begin. Darren led me through a foyer that was larger than my entire bedroom back at Zuri's house. The walls were lined with expensive-looking art, but something about the space felt empty, like a museum where no one actually lived. Emma is upstairs, he said, his voice careful and measured. She's 8 years old and she's deaf. She was born that way. He paused at the bottom of a sweeping staircase. I should warn you, she doesn't really interact with people much. The last 3 caregivers lasted less than a week each. I followed him up the stairs, my hand trailing along a banister that probably cost more than I'd made in a year at the community center. What happened to them? They couldn't connect with her. His shoulders sagged slightly. Emma can be challenging. She gets frustrated when people don't understand her, and most people don't even try. We stopped outside a bedroom door painted soft lavender. Darren knocked gently, then opened it without waiting for a response. The room was beautiful, filled with toys and books and everything a little girl could want. But the child sitting on the bed looked lost in the middle of it all. Emma had dark curls like her father and the largest brown eyes I'd ever seen. She was holding a stuffed elephant, rocking slightly back and forth. Emma, Darren said, speaking clearly and facing her so she could read his lips. "This is Geneva. She's going to be staying with us for a while." Emma looked up at me, her expression guarded. She'd learned not to trust the strangers who came and went from her life. I walked slowly into the room and sat down on the chair across from her bed. Then I lifted my hands and began to sign. "Hello, Emma. My name is Geneva." The effect was immediate. Emma's eyes went wide, the stuffed elephant forgotten in her lap. She stared at my hands like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Behind me, I heard Darren's sharp intake of breath. Emma's hands moved hesitantly at first, as if she wasn't sure this was real. "You can talk to me?" "Yes," I signed back. "I can talk to you." The dam burst. Emma's hands flew through the air, signing so fast I could barely keep up. She told me about her elephant, about the book she was reading, about how lonely she'd been since the last lady left. Words and emotions poured out of her like water through a broken levee. I glanced back at Darren and saw something that made my heart skip. He was staring at me with an expression I hadn't seen in decades: wonder, gratitude, and something else, something deeper and more dangerous. "I didn't know," he whispered. I had no idea she had so much to say. I turned back to Emma, who was still signing excitedly. She's been waiting for someone to listen. For the next hour, Emma and I talked. She showed me her favorite toys, her books, the drawings she'd made that no one had ever really looked at because they couldn't understand her explanations. She was brilliant, funny, and desperately hungry for connection. When it was time for dinner, Emma took my hand and led me downstairs to the kitchen. Darren had ordered pizza, clearly not much of a cook himself. "Usually she eats alone," he admitted, setting plates on the counter. "She doesn't like sitting at the dining room table. Too formal, I think." Emma climbed onto a stool at the kitchen island and patted the one next to her, inviting me to sit. As we ate, she kept signing to me about everything and nothing. Her father watched us with an expression of amazement. "How long have you known sign language?" he asked. "About 10 years, I said, taking a bite of pizza. "I started learning when I began volunteering at the community center. There were several deaf children in the programs, and I wanted to be able to communicate with them properly." "And you just kept at it?" I nodded. "Once you start learning, you realize how much you've been missing, how much they have to say, if you just know how to listen." Emma tugged on my sleeve and signed. "Are you going to leave like the others?" The question hit me like a physical blow. This beautiful little girl had learned to expect abandonment. "No," I signed back. "I'm not going anywhere." Something shifted in Emma's face. Hope, maybe, or just the tiniest bit of trust. After dinner, Darren showed me to my room. It was larger than any bedroom I'd ever had, with its own bathroom and a sitting area by the window. "The salary is $1,500 a week," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Plus room and board, of course. Is that acceptable?" $1,500 a week. I tried not to let my shock show. That was more money than I'd ever imagined making. "That's very generous," I managed. "Emma hasn't smiled in 3 months," he said quietly. Tonight at dinner, she smiled 6 times. I counted. He was quiet for a moment. "You gave me my daughter back, Geneva. There's no amount of money that could repay that." After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning, I'd been making Christmas dinner for my family. Tonight, I was in a mansion, caring for a little girl who needed me in a way that my own daughter never had. The next few days fell into a rhythm. I woke up early and made breakfast for Emma and Darren. Emma would chatter to me in sign language throughout the meal while her father watched with fascination. Then Darren would leave for work, and Emma and I would spend the day together. She was hungry for learning, for connection, for all the things she'd been denied. We read books together, played games, worked on puzzles. I taught her new signs, and she taught me about her world. On the 3rd day, she asked me about the sadness she could see in my eyes. "Why are you sad?" She signed during our afternoon snack. I hesitated. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest? "I had to leave my family," I signed back. "It makes me sad sometimes. Why did you have to leave? They didn't understand me the way you do. Emma nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense to her. Some people don't know how to see, she signed. But you see me. Yes, I signed, my throat tight with emotion. I see you. That evening, when Darren came home from work, Emma ran to him with an excitement I hadn't seen before. She signed rapidly, telling him about everything we'd done that day. Darren tried to follow along, but his sign language was limited to basic words. She's telling you about the story we read, I translated. About a little rabbit who learned to be brave. She says you're teaching her to be brave too, Darren said, watching his daughter's animated signing. She's teaching me the same thing, I replied. After Emma went to bed, Darren and I sat in the living room. He poured himself a glass of wine and offered me one, which I accepted gratefully. Can I ask you something? He said after a few minutes of comfortable silence. Of course. Why did you really answer that ad? On Christmas Day, no less. What happened to your family? I took a sip of wine, buying myself time. My daughter decided she didn't need me anymore. I find that hard to believe. I laughed, but it came out bitter. She thought I was interfering with her parenting. She has a son who's different, special, and she couldn't handle that I wanted to help him the way I'm helping Emma. Darren was quiet for a long moment. Her loss, he said finally. Is it, though? The words came out before I could stop them. Maybe she was right. Maybe I do interfere. Maybe I do try to fix things that aren't broken. Emma wasn't broken, Darren said firmly. She was just waiting for someone who spoke her language. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. He was a handsome man, probably 15 years younger than me, successful and kind. The type of man who could have any woman he wanted. Geneva, he said, his voice soft and uncertain. He set down his wine glass and turned to face me fully. My heart started beating faster, though I couldn't say why. I need to tell you something, he continued. These past few days, watching you with Emma, seeing her come alive again. He paused, running a hand through his dark hair. I never expected this. I never expected you. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Darren, I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air between us like a bridge I was afraid to cross. He was looking at me with such intensity that I couldn't breathe. That's impossible, I whispered. You barely know me. I know that you see my daughter the way no one else ever has. I know that you've brought light back into this house. I know that when I come home from work, the best part of my day is sitting here talking to you. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving mine. I know that I haven't felt this way about anyone since my wife died. The mention of his wife broke the spell. Reality came crashing back. I was 66 years old, a woman whose own daughter had thrown her out on Christmas Day. What could a man like Darren possibly see in me? This is crazy, I said, standing up abruptly. I should go to bed. But as I headed for the stairs, I could feel his eyes on me, and I knew that everything had just changed. Upstairs, Emma was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed elephant tucked under her arm. I stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of her small chest. She had been abandoned too, in her own way. Left to exist in silence because the people around her couldn't be bothered to learn her language. Maybe that's why we'd found each other. Two people who'd been discarded, who understood what it meant to be invisible. But now, for the first time in years, I felt seen. The next morning, I woke up before dawn with Darren's words still echoing in my mind. I'm in love with you. Part of me wanted to believe it was possible, but the rational part of my brain kept whispering that this was all too good to be true. Men like Darren didn't fall in love with women like me. I made my way downstairs quietly, hoping to have a few minutes alone before Emma woke up. But when I reached the kitchen, I found Darren already there, sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee and a tablet, scrolling through what looked like medical reports. He looked up when I entered, and I saw the same intensity in his eyes that had been there the night before. Good morning, he said softly. Good morning. I busied myself making coffee, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened when he was near. Geneva, about last night. Let's not, I said quickly. Please, it's too complicated. He was quiet for a moment, then closed the tablet. Actually, There's something I need to tell you. About Emma. About why finding you feels like a miracle. I poured my coffee and sat down across from him, noting the tension in his shoulders. Emma isn't just deaf, he began, his voice careful. She's also on the autism spectrum. High functioning, but still, it affects how she processes the world. I thought about the past few days, about Emma's need for routine, her intense focus on certain activities, the way she rocked when she was overwhelmed. I wondered, I said quietly. Some of the signs were there. You're the first person who's ever said that without making it sound like a diagnosis was something to be ashamed of. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I was beginning to recognize as a sign of stress. Most people hear autism, and they immediately start talking about limitations, about what she can't do. But you see what she can do. Now I do. Because of you. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Geneva. Emma hasn't had a real conversation with anyone in over a year. The specialists said she was too withdrawn, too difficult to reach. They recommended residential programs, special schools where she'd be with her own kind. The phrase made me flinch. I'd heard it before, about my grandson Jamie. And you considered it? I was desperate, he admitted. I felt like I was failing her every single day. She would have these meltdowns, these moments where she'd just disappear inside herself, and I couldn't reach her. I thought about Emma's bright smile yesterday, the way she'd chattered excitedly about everything and nothing. What changed your mind? You did. He reached across the counter and touched my hand briefly. In 3 days, you've accomplished what teams of specialists couldn't do in 3 years. You've shown me that Emma doesn't need to be fixed. She needs to be understood. We were interrupted by the sound of small feet on the stairs. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed and holding her stuffed elephant. She saw us sitting together and smiled, then signed good morning to both of us. As I watched her climb onto her favorite stool and begin signing about her dreams from the night before, I felt a familiar ache in my chest. This was what I'd wanted for Jamie. This easy communication, this acceptance of who he was. Geneva? Emma signed, tilting her head. Why do you look sad again? I forced a smile. I'm not sad. I was just thinking about someone. Who? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. My grandson. He's special like you, but his mother doesn't understand that yet. Emma nodded solemnly. Some mothers don't know how to see, she signed, like my first mother. I looked at Darren, confused. He'd never mentioned Emma having a different mother. Sarah wasn't Emma's biological mother, he explained quietly. We adopted Emma when she was 6 months old. Sarah. She had fertility issues, and adoption seemed like the answer. Seemed like? His jaw tightened. Sarah thought adoption would be like ordering from a catalog. Pick the perfect baby and voila, instant family. When Emma's deafness was diagnosed at 18 months, Sarah felt cheated. The casual cruelty of it made my stomach turn. She blamed Emma? She blamed everyone. The adoption agency for not catching it earlier. The doctors for not fixing it. Me for not researching better. He paused, watching Emma, who was absorbed in arranging her breakfast into precise patterns. But mostly, she blamed Emma for not being the perfect daughter she'd imagined. I thought about my own daughter, about Zuri's anger when I'd suggested Jamie might need different kinds of support. What happened to Sarah? She died 3 years ago, car accident. His voice was flat, emotionless. She was leaving Geneva. She'd packed her bags and was driving away when it happened. She couldn't handle being Emma's mother anymore. The weight of that revelation settled over me like a heavy blanket. Emma had lost not one, but 2 mothers, her biological mother through circumstances beyond anyone's control, and Sarah through rejection and abandonment. Does Emma know? She knows Sarah died. She doesn't know Sarah was leaving. He watched his daughter with protective intensity. She was only 5, but she understood enough. She's been waiting for the next person to leave ever since. No wonder Emma had asked me if I was going to leave like the others. No wonder she'd learned not to trust. The night Sarah died, Emma had what the doctors called a complete regression, Darren continued. She stopped trying to communicate altogether. Before that, she'd been learning some basic signs at school, making progress. After, nothing. She just shut down. I looked at Emma, who was now signing to her stuffed elephant, telling it a story I couldn't quite follow. The specialist said it was trauma response combined with her autism, Darren said. They said she might never open up again. But she opened up to you, I pointed out. Because you saw her first, he said simply. You looked at her and saw a child who had things to say, not a problem to be solved. After breakfast, Darren left for work, but not before stopping by the table where Emma and I were setting up a puzzle. Have a good day, sweetheart, he said to Emma, then looked at me. Both of you. Emma waved goodbye, then turned to me with serious eyes. He's happy now, she signed. What do you mean? Since you came, Daddy smiles more. Before, he was sad all the time, even when he tried to hide it. Out of the mouths of babes, or in this case, out of the hands of an 8-year-old who saw more than most adults gave her credit for. We spent the morning working on the puzzle, a 1,000-piece image of a garden full of butterflies. Emma had an incredible ability to see patterns, to know exactly where each piece belonged. As we worked, she told me stories about each butterfly, creating elaborate personalities and adventures for them. This one is brave, she signed, pointing to a blue butterfly in the corner. She's not afraid to fly far from home. What about this one? I asked, indicating a yellow butterfly near the center. She takes care of the baby butterflies. She makes sure they're not scared when they learn to fly. I smiled, recognizing myself in that description. Emma, I signed carefully. Can I ask you about your first mother? The one who died? Emma's hands stilled for a moment, then resumed working on the puzzle. She didn't like me very much. The matter-of-fact way she said it broke my heart. Why do you think that? She used to cry when she looked at me. And she never learned my language, even though Daddy tried to teach her. Emma placed another puzzle piece with precision. She wanted me to be different. Different how? Not broken. Emma's hands moved slowly now, carefully forming each word. She thought I was broken because I couldn't hear. But you don't think I'm broken, do you? I reached over and took her small hands in mine. You're not broken, Emma. You're perfect exactly as you are. She smiled then, the kind of smile that could light up a room. I know, she signed. Daddy says the same thing. But it's nice to hear it from someone else, too. That afternoon, while Emma was napping, I found myself wandering through the house. It was beautiful but sterile, like a showroom rather than a home. There were no family photos on display, no personal touches that spoke of the people who lived here. I found myself in what must have been Darren's study, a masculine room lined with law books and financial reports. On the desk was a framed photo that made me stop in my tracks. It showed Darren, younger and smiling, with his arm around a blonde woman who was holding a toddler. The woman was beautiful in a cold, perfect way, but what struck me was her expression. She was looking at the camera, not at the child in her arms. And little Emma, barely 2 years old, was reaching toward her father instead of snuggling into the woman holding her. Even then, she'd known who truly loved her. That was taken about 6 months before Sarah died. I spun around to find Darren standing in the doorway, his tie loosened and his jacket over his arm. I'm sorry, I said quickly. It's okay. He walked over and picked up the photo, staring at it with an unreadable expression. I keep it because it's one of the few pictures I have of Emma from that time. But looking at it now, knowing what I know about how you interact with her, he trailed off, shaking his head. What? Sarah never once got down to Emma's level to communicate, never learned more than 5 or 6 basic signs. She treated Emma's deafness like a personal inconvenience rather than just another way of being in the world. I thought about the past few days, about how natural it felt to sign with Emma, to see the world through her eyes. She wasn't meant to be Emma's mother, I said quietly. No, Darren agreed. She wasn't. He set the photo down and turned to face me fully. But you, Geneva, the way you are with her, it's like you were made for this. Made for her. Don't, I whispered. Don't what? Don't make this into something it's not. I'm just the nanny, Darren, the hired help. Are you? He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, because it doesn't feel that way to me. It has to be that way, I said, backing up until I hit the edge of his desk. I'm 66 years old. You're successful, wealthy, young. 43 isn't that young, he interrupted with a small smile. Young enough. Too young for me. Says who? The question hung between us, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. Says society? Says my daughter, who'd already made it clear I was too old and irrelevant for anyone to want. Says the voice in my head that had been telling me for years that my time for love had passed. Geneva, Darren said softly. Do you know what I see when I look at you? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. I see a woman who gave up her Christmas, her home, her family to take care of a little girl she'd never met. I see someone who learned an entire language just so she could communicate with children who needed her. I see strength and kindness and a heart big enough to love a damaged man and his complicated daughter. You're not damaged, I whispered. Neither are you, he said. But that's what your daughter made you believe, isn't it? The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. Zuri had made me feel broken, unwanted, too much trouble to keep around. But here was this man, this beautiful, successful man, telling me I was valuable. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. Do what? Be wanted, be chosen, be enough. Darren reached up and touched my face gently. Then let me show you. Before I could protest, before I could list all the reasons this was impossible, he kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. And for the first time in decades, I felt truly alive. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but it changed everything. When Darren pulled away, I could see my own wonder reflected in his eyes. For a moment, we just stood there, two people who'd found something unexpected in the midst of loss. Then reality crashed back in, and I stepped away from him, my heart hammering against my ribs. I can't, I whispered. This is too complicated. Geneva? No. I moved toward the door, needing space to think. I need to check on Emma. But Emma was still napping, so I found myself in the kitchen, mechanically preparing dinner while my mind spun in circles. How had this happened? How had I gone from being homeless on Christmas Day to being kissed by a man who seemed too good to be true? The answer, I knew, lay in my past, in the choices I'd made and the prices I'd paid for them. When Darren came downstairs an hour later, I was stirring a pot of soup with more force than necessary. Geneva, he said carefully. Can we talk? There's nothing to talk about, I said without looking at him. What happened upstairs was a mistake. Was it? I finally turned to face him, and the gentle patience in his expression almost undid me. You don't understand, Darren. You don't know who I am, where I come from. Then tell me. I shook my head. You wouldn't understand. Try me. For a moment I considered it, but then I heard Emma's footsteps on the stairs, and the moment passed. Dinner was awkward, despite Emma's cheerful chatter. She seemed to sense the tension between her father and me, her eyes darting between us with concern. Are you sad again? She signed to me as we cleared the table. A little, I admitted. Why? How do you explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes love feels more dangerous than loneliness? Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings, I signed back. Emma nodded sagely. Daddy has complicated feelings too, but he's happier when you're here. That night, after Emma was asleep, I found myself standing on the back patio, wrapped in a coat I'd borrowed from the hall closet. The view from the house was breathtaking. The city lights spread out below like scattered diamonds. You'll catch pneumonia out here. I turned to find Darren approaching with 2 steaming mugs. He handed me one, and I inhaled the scent of hot chocolate with a hint of peppermint. Thank you, I said, accepting the warmth gratefully. We stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping our drinks and watching the lights below. I was married for 32 years, I said suddenly, the words escaping before I could stop them. Darren didn't respond, just waited for me to continue. Robert was a good man, steady, reliable, kind. We met when I was 19, married when I was 21. He was everything my mother wanted for me. Stable job, nice family, good prospects. I took a sip of hot chocolate, letting the sweetness ground me, but I was never in love with him, not the way I should have been. I loved him, but I wasn't in love with him. Do you understand the difference? Yes, Darren said quietly. He deserved better than that. Better than a wife who was grateful for his love, but not passionate about it. I stared out at the lights, remembering. But I was young and scared and pregnant. And he offered me security. Pregnant with Zuri? I nodded. Robert wasn't Zuri's biological father, but he raised her as his own. Never once made her feel like she was anything less than his daughter. And her real father? The question I'd been dreading. I closed my eyes, feeling the old shame wash over me. I was 17 when I met Daniel. He was 25, charming, exciting, everything my sheltered life wasn't. I laughed bitterly. I thought I was so sophisticated, so mature. I thought he loved me, but he didn't. He loved the idea of me. Young, naive, easy to impress. When I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared. Just vanished, like he'd never existed. I gripped the mug tighter. My parents were devastated. Good girls from good families didn't get pregnant out of wedlock in 1977. I was their shame, their failure. So you married Robert. So I married Robert, I confirmed. And I spent the next 32 years trying to be grateful enough, good enough, worthy enough of the life he'd given me. Darren was quiet for a long moment. What happened to him? Cancer. Pancreatic. He fought for 2 years, but... I shrugged, the gesture inadequate for the magnitude of that loss. He died 4 years ago. And then I discovered that I didn't know how to be alone. I'd gone from my parents' house to Robert's house without ever learning who I was on my own. I turned to look at Darren. Zuri invited me to move in with her family after the funeral, said it would be good for Jamie to have his grandmother around. But it wasn't good for you. It wasn't a question, and I appreciated that he understood without explanation. I thought I was helping, I said. Jamie was struggling in school, having meltdowns at home. I could see the signs that Zuri couldn't or wouldn't see. So I started researching, learning about autism, about different ways to communicate with him. You learned sign language for Jamie. Among other things, I took classes, read books, attended workshops. I wanted to understand his world, to help him feel less alone in it. I smiled sadly. He's brilliant, Darren. Creative and funny and so loving when he feels safe. But Zuri couldn't see past his differences. She saw them as flaws. She saw them as my fault. The words came out harder than I intended. In her mind, I'd failed as a mother by having different expectations for him. I was undermining her authority by suggesting there might be better ways to help him communicate. So she pushed you out. She made it clear that my input wasn't welcome, that I was too old, too set in my ways, too eager to pathologize normal childhood behavior. I finished my hot chocolate and set the empty mug on the patio table. The irony is that everything I learned for Jamie has helped me connect with Emma. Maybe that's why you found each other, Darren said softly. Maybe. I looked at him, this man who'd somehow seen value in a discarded woman. But it doesn't change the facts, Darren. I'm still 66 years old. I'm still damaged goods. You're not damaged. My own daughter threw me away on Christmas Day. If I can't be enough for the child I raised, how can I possibly be enough for you? Darren set down his own mug and turned to face me fully. Can I tell you something about Zuri? I frowned. What could you possibly know about my daughter? I know that she's afraid. Afraid of what? Of being like you. The words hit me like a slap. What's that supposed to mean? Think about it, Geneva. You learned sign language to help special needs children. You researched autism to better understand your grandson. You've dedicated your life to seeing people who are overlooked, to helping those who can't help themselves. He stepped closer. Zuri probably looks at you and sees everything she's not willing to be. I stared at him, the pieces clicking into place in a way that was both illuminating and heartbreaking. She's afraid that accepting Jamie's differences means accepting that she's failed him, Darren continued. And she's afraid that your willingness to learn and adapt makes her look like the inadequate parent. So she eliminated the comparison. She eliminated the mirror that reflected her own shortcomings. I felt tears prick my eyes. That doesn't make what she did right. No, it doesn't. But it makes it understandable. And it proves that you're not the problem, Geneva. You never were. We stood there in the cold night air, and for the first time since Christmas Day, I felt something ease in my chest. Maybe Darren was right. Maybe Zuri's rejection said more about her than it did about me. There's something else, I said quietly. About Robert, about our marriage. Darren waited. I never told him I wasn't in love with him. I let him believe that his love was enough for both of us. And when he was dying, when he told me how grateful he was to have had such a happy marriage, I swallowed hard. I couldn't tell him the truth. I let him die believing I'd loved him the way he loved me. Because telling him would have served no purpose except to hurt him, or because I was a coward. Geneva, Darren said gently. What you did was kind. You protected his feelings when there was nothing to be gained by honesty. That's not cowardice. That's love. Is it, though? Or is it just another form of lying? You stayed with him for 32 years. You cared for him, supported him, raised his child with him. You gave him the best version of love you were capable of at the time. That's not nothing. I looked at this man who seemed to see the best in everyone, who found worth where others saw only flaws. Why are you being so understanding? I asked. Why aren't you running in the other direction? Because I know what it's like to live in a marriage without passion, he said simply. My marriage to Sarah was built on obligation and expectation, not love. The difference is that you stayed and made the best of it. Sarah ran. And now? Now I know what it feels like to want someone so much it scares me. To look at someone and see not just who they are, but who they help me become. He reached for my hand. I'm not Robert, Geneva, and you're not Sarah. We get to choose what this becomes. I don't know how, I whispered. Then we'll figure it out together. He was standing so close now that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. When he reached up to cup my face in his hands, I didn't pull away. I'm scared, I admitted. So am I. What if I disappoint you? What if you don't? He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I felt 40 years of careful control begin to crumble. For so long, I'd been the practical one, the responsible one, the one who put everyone else's needs before her own. But here, in Darren's arms, I felt selfish for the first time in my life. I wanted this. I wanted him. I wanted the chance to find out what love could feel like when it was chosen rather than settled for. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Geneva, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I need you to know something. What? This isn't just about gratitude for what you've done for Emma. This isn't just about being lonely or needing someone to help with her care. He looked into my eyes with an intensity that made my knees weak. I'm falling in love with you because of who you are, not because of what you do for my daughter. How can you be sure? Because when I watch you with her, I see the woman I want to spend my life with. When I listen to you talk about your past, I see someone who's been undervalued and underappreciated. When I think about my future, I can't imagine it without you in it. The words were everything I'd never dared to hope for, and terrifying for exactly that reason. Darren, I started, but he pressed a finger gently to my lips. You don't have to say anything now, he said. Just, don't run away. Give us a chance to see what this could become. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Later that night, as I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about second chances, about the difference between settling and choosing, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the best part of my life was still ahead of me. But first, I had to believe I was worth fighting for. 3 weeks had passed since that night on the patio, and my life had settled into a rhythm I never could have imagined. During the day, Emma and I explored her world together, reading books, working on puzzles, taking walks through the neighborhood where she would point out every dog and flower and interesting cloud formation. In the evenings, after she went to bed, Darren and I would talk for hours about everything and nothing, slowly building something that felt both fragile and unbreakable. He hadn't pressured me for more than I was ready to give. There had been stolen kisses in the kitchen while Emma napped, hands held during late-night conversations, moments of connection that made my heart race like I was a teenager again. But we'd been careful, taking things slowly, both of us aware that Emma's well-being had to come first. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. I was in the kitchen making Emma's favorite pancakes when the doorbell rang. Darren had already left for work, and Emma was upstairs getting dressed, so I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to answer it. Through the peephole, I saw a face I hadn't expected to see again so soon. Zuri. My daughter stood on the front steps wearing a navy blazer and a grim expression, her hair pulled back in the severe bun she favored for what she called serious business. Behind her stood Marcus, looking uncomfortable and apologetic, and a man I didn't recognize in an expensive suit. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. "Hello, Mother," Zuri said, her voice cool and professional. "Zuri." I stepped back, allowing them to enter. "What are you doing here? We need to talk." She gestured to the man in the suit. "This is David Brennan, my attorney." The words hit me like ice water. "Your attorney? What's this about? May we sit down?" Marcus asked quietly, and I could see the apology in his eyes. I led them to the living room, my mind racing. How had they found me? What did they want? "Nice place," Zuri commented, her gaze taking in the expensive furnishings and artwork. "Very upscale for a domestic worker." The tone in her voice made my stomach clench. "I'm not a domestic worker. I'm a caregiver." "Right." She sat down on the edge of the sofa like she was afraid of contaminating herself. "That's actually what we're here to discuss." The attorney opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm here representing your daughter's concerns about your current living situation." "My living situation is fine," I said, remaining standing. "I have a job, a place to live, people who value me." "Do they?" Zuri's voice was sharp. "Or are you being taken advantage of by a wealthy man who's using your desperation to get cheap childcare?" The accusation stung because there was a tiny part of me that had wondered the same thing. "That's not what this is it?" She leaned forward. "Mom, you're 66 years old, living in the house of a man you barely know, taking care of his disabled child. Don't you see how this looks?" "I see how it looks to you," I said carefully. "But you don't know anything about my life here." "I know enough." Zuri's eyes were cold. "I know that Mr. Foster has been taking advantage of your vulnerability. I know that you've been isolated from your real family, manipulated into believing that strangers care more about you than we do." "Real family?" The laugh that escaped me was bitter. "You threw me out on Christmas Day, Zuri? You told me to get out of your house and your life." "I was angry," she said, her voice softening slightly. "I said things I didn't mean, but that doesn't give you the right to disappear and worry us sick." "Worry you sick?" I stared at her in disbelief. "You didn't even call to see if I was alive." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Zuri, maybe we should—" "No." She held up a hand. "Mom needs to hear this. She needs to understand that what she's doing isn't healthy." The attorney cleared his throat. "Mrs. Morrison, your daughter is concerned that you may be suffering from diminished capacity due to your age and recent emotional trauma. She's asked me to explore options for ensuring your welfare." The room went silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Diminished capacity?" I repeated slowly. "You're not thinking clearly," Zuri said, her voice gentle now, which somehow made it worse. "Leaving your family, moving in with strangers, allowing yourself to be exploited, these aren't the actions of someone who's making rational decisions. I'm not being exploited. Mom, look around you." She gestured to the expensive room. "Do you really think a man like this would be interested in a woman your age if he didn't need something from you?" The words hit their target with surgical precision. All my old insecurities came rushing back. The voice that told me I was too old, too worn out, too ordinary for someone like Darren to genuinely care about. "You don't know him," I said weakly. "I know his type." Zuri's voice was confident now, sensing victory. "Rich, powerful men who prey on vulnerable women. He's using you, Mom, and when he's done, you'll be left with nothing." "That's not true." "Prove it." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "If he really cares about you, where is he now?" Why isn't he here defending you? He's at work. He doesn't even know you're here. Convenient. The attorney spoke up again. Mrs. Morrison, your daughter is prepared to take you home today. You can return to your family, where people who genuinely care about you can make sure you're properly looked after. I don't need to be looked after. Don't you? Zuri's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. Mom, you're living in a fantasy. You think this man loves you. But what happens when reality sets in? What happens when he realizes that a 66-year-old woman with no money and no prospects isn't really what he wants? Each word was like a knife twist. Because part of me, the part that had been trained by years of being undervalued, believed her. You can come home, Zuri continued. We can work through our problems as a family. But you need to stop this delusion before it destroys you. I was saved from responding by the sound of small feet running down the stairs. Emma appeared in the living room doorway, still in her pajamas, her face bright with excitement. Geneva, she signed. Can we make the pancakes with the funny faces today? She stopped when she saw the strangers in the room, her expression shifting to wariness. Zuri stared at Emma with barely concealed distaste. So this is the child. Her name is Emma, I said, moving protectively toward her. And yes, this is who I take care of. She's deaf, Zuri observed, as if it were a personal failing. She's perfect, I said firmly. Emma looked between me and the strangers, sensing the tension. Who are they? She signed. Before I could answer, Zuri spoke up. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Mom. You're so invested in this child who isn't even related to you that you're forgetting about your real family. Geneva takes care of me, Emma signed, not caring that the others couldn't understand her. She's my friend. What is she doing with her hands? Zuri asked, her voice sharp with irritation. She's communicating, I said. Something you might understand if you'd ever bothered to learn how to talk to your own son. The shot hit home. Zuri's face flushed red. How dare you? How dare I what? Point out that you've refused to acknowledge Jamie's needs? That you've spent years making him feel like he's broken instead of learning how to reach him? Jamie is fine exactly as he is. Jamie is brilliant and wonderful, but he's struggling, and you refuse to see it because it doesn't fit your perfect family image. Marcus finally spoke up. Geneva, maybe you should come with us. We can discuss this at home, away from. He gestured vaguely at Emma. Away from what? Away from a child who needs me? Away from people who value what I have to offer? Away from people who are using you, Zuri said flatly. Mom, you've been manipulated into believing that these strangers need you more than your real family does. My real family threw me out on Christmas Day. And we're here to bring you home. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Geneva, are you leaving? She signed, her eyes wide with fear. The question broke my heart. This child had already been abandoned by one mother. Now she was watching strangers try to take away the person who'd finally learned to see her. No, sweetheart, I signed back. I'm not leaving. You are if you want what's best for everyone, Zuri said. Mom, this isn't healthy for you or for this child. She's too attached to you. And when this arrangement inevitably falls apart, she'll be devastated. The only thing that would devastate her is being abandoned again. Again? The attorney perked up. What happened before? I realized too late that I'd revealed information that wasn't mine to share. Her mother died, I said carefully. And now you're trying to replace her, Zuri said with satisfaction. Mom, don't you see how unhealthy this is? You're trying to live out some fantasy of being needed, of being important, but you're setting this child up for heartbreak when reality intrudes. The reality is that Emma has someone who loves her and understands her. For now. But what happens when her father gets tired of you? What happens when he realizes that there are younger, prettier women who could do the same job? The cruel words hung in the air like poison. Emma might not have understood them, but she could read the emotion on everyone's faces. She pressed closer to me, her small hand finding mine. You need to come with us, Mom, Zuri said, standing up. This fantasy has gone on long enough, and if I refuse, then we'll have to explore other options. The attorney's voice was gentle but firm, options that might not be as pleasant for anyone involved. The threat was clear. They would have me declared incompetent if I didn't comply. I looked down at Emma, who was watching me with those intelligent brown eyes that missed nothing. She deserved so much better than another abandonment, another loss. But maybe Zuri was right. Maybe I was being selfish, clinging to a life that was too good to be true. Geneva, Emma signed, her hands moving urgently. Don't listen to them. Daddy loves you. I love you. We're your family now. Out of the mouths of babes, I looked at my daughter, at the attorney, at Marcus who couldn't meet my eyes. I need to think about this, I said finally. There's nothing to think about, Zuri said. Pack your things, we're leaving. I said I need to think about it. Mom, get out. The words came out quiet but firm. Get out of this house right now. Zuri's eyes narrowed. Fine, but I'm not giving up on you, Mother. I'll be back, and next time I won't be asking nicely. After they left, Emma and I sat on the couch together, her small body pressed against my side. Are you really going to leave? She signed. I wanted to tell her no. Wanted to promise that I would never abandon her the way everyone else had. But I couldn't get Zuri's words out of my head. What if she was right? What if I was just a foolish old woman living in a fantasy? What if Darren really was just using me? The thought made me sick, but I couldn't shake it. When Darren came home that evening and found me sitting in the darkened living room, he knew immediately that something was wrong. Geneva? What happened? I told him everything, watching his face carefully for any sign that Zuri had been right. But all I saw was anger and concern. She threatened you, he said when I finished. She actually threatened to have you declared incompetent if you didn't come with her. Maybe she's right, though. Maybe I am being foolish. Geneva, look at me. He knelt in front of my chair, taking my hands in his. Do you really believe that everything between us has been a lie? I wanted to say no, but the doubt was eating at me. I don't know what to believe anymore. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up. I'll be right back. He disappeared upstairs, returning a few minutes later with a small velvet box. My heart stopped. Darren, what are you doing? He dropped to one knee in front of me, opening the box to reveal a simple, elegant diamond ring. I'm proving that your daughter is wrong, he said. Geneva Morrison, will you marry me? The ring sparkled in the lamplight, but I couldn't take my eyes off Darren's face. He was looking at me with such intensity, such certainty, that it took my breath away. You can't be serious, I whispered. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. His voice was steady, unwavering. Geneva, I love you. Not because you take care of Emma, not because I'm lonely, not because I need a housekeeper. I love you because you're brave and kind and beautiful, and because you see the best in people even when they can't see it in themselves. Darren, this is crazy. We've only known each other for 3 weeks. I've known enough in 3 weeks to know that I want to spend the rest of my life getting to know more. He shifted slightly, still on one knee. I know this seems sudden, but your daughter's visit today made me realize something. I don't want to waste time being careful or practical. I don't want to risk losing you because I was too afraid to fight for what I want. What about Emma? What if she doesn't want this? As if summoned by her name, Emma appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas. She must have heard our voices and crept out of bed to investigate. Daddy? Ah, she signed, coming down the stairs. What are you doing? Darren looked up at his daughter, still holding the ring box. I'm asking Geneva to marry us, he said, speaking aloud while he signed so I could follow along. Emma's face lit up like the sun. Really? Really? But only if she says yes. Emma ran over to me, her hands moving rapidly. Please, say yes, Geneva. Please, I want you to be my mom forever. The word mom hit me like a lightning bolt. This beautiful, intelligent, loving child wanted me to be her mother. Not just her caregiver, not just the woman who happened to understand her language, but her mother. Sweetheart, I signed back, my hands trembling. Are you sure? Being a family is a big responsibility. I'm sure. Emma's expression was solemn, mature beyond her 8 years. You're the first person who ever really saw me. You make Daddy happy. You make me happy. We're already a family. We just need to make it official." I looked between them. This man who'd offered me a love I'd never dared dream of, and this child who'd given me purpose when I thought my usefulness was over. "Your daughter was right about one thing," I said to Darren. "This is crazy." His face fell slightly. "But maybe crazy is exactly what I need," I continued. "Maybe I've spent too many years being practical and careful and grateful for whatever scraps of love people were willing to throw my way." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes, I'll marry you." Darren slipped the ring onto my finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled me into his arms. When he kissed me, I felt like I was finally, truly alive for the first time in my 66 years. Emma threw her arms around both of us, and for a moment we stood there in a perfect family embrace. "When?" Emma signed when we finally broke apart. "When what?" I asked. "When are you getting married? Can I be in the wedding? Can I wear a pretty dress?" Darren and I looked at each other and laughed. "Soon," he said. "Very soon." The next 2 months passed in a whirlwind. We decided on a small ceremony in the backyard, with just a few close friends and Darren's parents, who flew in from Seattle. His mother, Catherine, was a gracious woman who welcomed me with open arms and seemed delighted that her son had found happiness again. I was worried about him, she confided to me the day before the wedding as we arranged flowers for the ceremony. After Sarah died, he threw himself into work and Emma's care, but he never made time for his own happiness. You've given him that. He's given me something too, I said. Hope. The chance to be valued for who I am instead of what I can do for others. That's what love should be, Catherine said with a smile. Emma was in heaven, fussing over every detail of the wedding like a tiny event planner. She'd chosen her own dress, a pale pink confection with ribbons and flowers that made her feel like a princess. She would be our only attendant, and she took the responsibility seriously. The flowers have to be perfect, she signed the morning of the ceremony. Everything has to be perfect for Mama Geneva. Mama Geneva. The title filled my heart to overflowing every time she used it. There had been no word from Zuri since that awful day when she'd tried to force me to leave. Part of me was sad about that. Despite everything, she was still my daughter, and I'd hoped she might eventually understand that my happiness didn't diminish hers. But I couldn't dwell on that today. Today was about the future, not the past. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. I wore a cream-colored dress that Catherine had helped me choose, and Darren looked impossibly handsome in his navy suit. Emma walked ahead of us, scattering rose petals and beaming with pride. When the judge asked if anyone objected to the union, Emma raised her hand. I object to anyone who thinks Geneva isn't perfect for my daddy, she announced in her clear, proud voice. The small gathering erupted in laughter and applause. After we exchanged vows and rings, after we kissed as husband and wife for the first time, Emma ran up to us with tears in her eyes. Now we're really a family, she signed. We were already a family, I signed back. Now we're just making it official. That evening, after the guests had gone home and Emma had finally fallen asleep exhausted from excitement, Darren and I sat on the patio where we'd shared our first real conversation. Any regrets? He asked, his arm around my shoulders. Only one, I said. He tensed. What? I regret waiting 66 years to find out what real love feels like. He relaxed, pulling me closer. We have plenty of time to make up for it. Do we? I'm not exactly young, Darren. You're not exactly old either. My grandmother lived to be 98 and was sharp as a tack until the day she died. That gives us at least 30 more years together. The thought of 30 more years of this happiness seemed almost too good to believe. What about Emma? What happens when she grows up and doesn't need us anymore? Then we'll find new ways to be useful, Darren said. Maybe we'll travel, see the world. Maybe we'll volunteer together, help other families like ours. Maybe we'll just grow old disgracefully and scandalize the neighbors. I laughed. I've never scandalized anyone in my life. Well then, we have that to look forward to. 6 months later, I was in the kitchen making dinner when the doorbell rang. Darren was at a conference in Chicago, and Emma was at a sleepover with a friend she'd made at her new school. A school where her deafness was seen as just another form of diversity rather than a disability. I opened the door to find Marcus standing on the front step, looking older and more tired than I remembered. "Hello, Geneva," he said quietly. "Marcus." I stepped back, letting him in. "Is everything all right? Is Jamie okay?" "Jamie's fine. Actually, he's better than fine." Marcus followed me into the living room, accepting the cup of coffee I offered him. "Geneva, I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For not standing up to Zuri that day. For letting her treat you the way she did." He stared into his coffee cup. "She was wrong, Geneva. About everything." I sat down across from him, waiting for him to continue. "After you left, after the wedding announcement appeared in the paper, Zuri was. Well, she was angry. She kept saying you'd been brainwashed, that you'd prove everyone right by making a fool of yourself." He looked up at me. "But then we saw the pictures from your wedding, and Emma, the joy on that little girl's face." "She's happy," I said simply. "Anyone can see that, and Zuri." She finally started to question whether maybe she'd been wrong about some things. Marcus set down his cup. "Geneva, she took Jamie to a specialist, a real one, not just the pediatrician who kept saying he'd grow out of his quirks." My heart leaped. And you were right. About everything. Jamie is on the autism spectrum, and all those things you tried to tell us about communication strategies, about understanding his needs. You were right. Tears sprang to my eyes. "How is he doing?" "Better. So much better. He's learning sign language now, and some other communication techniques. He's happier, more confident. He's still Jamie. But now we understand him better." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "Geneva, I can't help thinking about how much easier this could have been if we'd listened to you from the beginning. The important thing is that you're listening now. Zuri wants to see you," he said. "She wants to apologize." I was quiet for a long moment, processing this news. "She's ashamed," Marcus continued. "Ashamed of how she treated you. Ashamed that she let her pride get in the way of helping her own son. She knows she doesn't deserve your forgiveness, but she's hoping." "She's hoping what?" "She's hoping that maybe, someday, you might want to be part of Jamie's life again. And maybe, if she's very lucky, part of hers." I thought about my grandson. About the bright, beautiful boy who'd been struggling to be understood. I thought about Zuri, my complicated daughter who'd been so afraid of admitting she didn't have all the answers that she'd pushed away the one person who might have helped. "Tell her she can call me," I said finally. "We'll start there and see what happens." Marcus smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "She'll be so relieved." "But Marcus," I added, "I'm not the same woman who left her house on Christmas Day. I have a family now, a life that makes me happy. If Zuri wants to be part of that life, she needs to understand that it comes with conditions. I think she's ready to accept that." After Marcus left, I called Darren in Chicago to tell him about the visit. "How do you feel about it?" he asked. "Hopeful," I said, "but cautious. I won't let her hurt Emma or disrupt what we've built here." "I know you won't. That's one of the things I love about you. You protect the people you care about. Even from my own daughter, if necessary. Even from your own daughter." That night, Emma and I video called from her friend's house to say goodnight. "Mama Geneva," she signed. "Katie's mom says you used to have a grandson." "I did. I still do, actually. His name is Jamie. Will I ever meet him?" I thought about that question, about the possibility of bridging the gap between my old family and my new one. "Maybe someday," I signed back. "Would you like that?" "Yes, I'd like to have a cousin. Katie has lots of cousins, and they have fun together. A cousin." The simple way Emma saw relationships, without all the complicated baggage that adults carried, amazed me. "Well, we'll see what the future brings," I told her. 3 weeks later, Zuri called. The conversation was awkward at first, full of halting apologies and careful explanations. But gradually, slowly, we began to rebuild something that might someday resemble a mother-daughter relationship. She came to visit a month after that, bringing Jamie with her. I was nervous about how Emma and Jamie would interact, given their different communication styles and needs. I needn't have worried. Within minutes, Emma had taken Jamie under her wing, showing him her room, her books, her favorite hiding spots in the garden. They communicated in a mixture of sign language, pointing, and the kind of intuitive understanding that exists between children who know what it's like to be different. "She's good with him," Zuri observed, watching through the window as Emma taught Jamie how to throw a ball for our dog. "She understands what it's like to be misunderstood," I said. "Is that what I did? Misunderstand him?" "You were scared," I said gently. "Fear makes us do things we wouldn't normally do. I was afraid you were right about him. I was afraid that admitting he needed help meant I'd failed as a mother." Zuri's voice was quiet, reflective. "I was afraid you'd take over the way you always seemed to take over when I was a child. I never meant to take over. I just wanted to help. I know that now. But back then, it felt like you were saying I wasn't capable of handling my own life." We watched our children, because that's what they were now, our children, playing together in the garden. "I'm sorry," Zuri said suddenly. "For Christmas Day, for the lawyer, for all of it. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." "I'm sorry too," I said, "for not understanding how my help felt like criticism, for not giving you space to figure things out on your own. Can we try again?" she asked. "Can we find a way to be family again?" "We can try," I agreed, "but it has to be different this time. I have a life here, a family here. You can be part of it, but you can't try to control it." "I understand." And she did seem to understand. Over the following months, Zuri made an effort to get to know Darren and Emma, to be supportive rather than critical, to appreciate the life I'd built rather than questioning it. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of tension, still old patterns that tried to reassert themselves. But slowly, carefully, we built something new. A year after our wedding, Darren and I were sitting on the patio watching Emma and Jamie chase fireflies in the garden. They were chattering to each other in a mixture of sign language and spoken words, their laughter carrying on the warm evening air. "Happy?" Darren asked, his hand finding mine. "Impossibly happy," I said. "Sometimes I can't believe this is my life." "Believe it," he said, lifting our joined hands to his lips to kiss my knuckles. "You deserve every bit of this happiness." "We all do," I said, watching our children, all of our children, biological and chosen and blended together, create their own perfect world in our backyard. For 66 years, I'd believed that my job was to make other people happy, even at the expense of my own joy. I'd thought that love was something you earned through service, through sacrifice, through making yourself small enough that others could shine brighter. But here, in this garden, with this man beside me and these children who called me Mama Geneva, I'd learned a different truth. Love wasn't something you earned. It was something you chose, something you built, something you protected and nurtured and celebrated. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it was something that chose you right back. As the sun set over our little family, I said a silent prayer of gratitude for that Christmas day that had seemed like the end of everything, but had actually been the beginning of the life I was meant to live. The life where I was finally, completely, enough. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.